struck by your description of the single leg and the right angles, because in Iona they took on this kind of, it was like some mass crucifixion type scene, and one of the walls looked as if they were wearing a habit as well. So I've got some close-ups as well, but that was my sixth.
He told me a story about taking his godson to be an extra on a film set, and he told me how much he had, I don't know if enjoyed was the word, but how interesting he found the experience of, a non-actor getting to experience the process, the behind-the-scenes process of being dressed up and being put through hair and makeup. And it was this point that he found really interesting, this process, and then that alongside him reading Proust and being interested in salons in general. So that's how he sort of told me about it, was those two stories and those two things linking in his mind and wondering if anything could come out of that in terms of a theatrical production. When I first met him, we were working on a talk that he was going to give at the IETM in Glasgow, which is a theatre conference. And at the end of that talk, he actually wrote a script of what one audience's experience of the Salon Project might be, and it hadn't been developed yet, and it hadn't been, actually, made into something tangible or a tangible experience. But so I think I probably did from that get an idea of what he thought would happen, and it was basically this: you've given your measurements when you book a ticket, you don't really know what's going to happen. You arrive at the theatre an hour before, you're placed into a 19th century evening costume, and then you go into a room and experience a salon. But there was at that point, as far as I can remember, there weren't any actual events that he knew that were going to happen within that space. And then I think there was quite a key part of it was the feeling an audience member might get when they then were on the street in their civilian clothes again. That there was definitely that was a key element, was the sort of disjointed feeling from having had an experience in this regalia and then being back in the normal world. So each group arrive at a different time, each group of 20 audience members, in order for the wardrobe department to be able to get everybody in costume. So each group of 20 have two guides with them, a male and a female guide. And the idea is that these people are just there to answer questions and to literally guide the audience through the evening. We know it is an immersive theatrical experience, but we didn't want it to be a scary, frightening, participatory one. And so I guess I feel our key role as a guide is to reassure audience members as soon as they arrive that there is no compulsion for them to do anything, and just for them, if they do find it an alien, strange experience being dressed and having to navigate makeup and hair and all these things, to feel that there's someone there who'll be with them throughout and who will be able to answer any questions that they have and make them feel comfortable and be able to introduce them to people and to chat to them if they've come on their own and have no one to talk to. So I think we're there to sort of help people out and to encourage conversation and to help facilitate their enjoyment of the evening. We'll often get a list of who's coming that evening, and there might be some people whose names you'd recognise, or there might be some people who are friends of friends. So there's always that initial introduction or hello when we're standing in the bar. And on that level, it's quite easy, but then there'll be other people and you have no idea who they are or why they've come. So I think being thrust into a dressing room with people is quite sort of intimate in its own way and quite a funny experience. So you do start chatting to people straight away, or you might be sensitive and be like, oh, they're a bit uncomfortable, I'll talk to them when we're inside the salon. And then I guess it's just about sort of biting the bullet and going up to people and asking them things and not being too shy. Because I think if we're confident and feel at home in the space, then they will too. We basically try and avoid saying, what do you do? Because the whole evening is about conversation and the art of conversation and provoking conversation, and there's all these amazing events that happen within the salon that are there to provoke conversation. So we try and avoid mundane opening gambits. And maybe I always talk about what I'm reading, or maybe if I've heard an interesting fact or something recently, then I start showing off about that. Did you know that eels are able to, I don't know, something like that. So I guess there is an idea of trying not to be too boring and trying to elevate the conversation in a way. Well, I think in the initial stages, I wouldn't really, although we're granting them the experience that an actor might get, it's not really the same, because most of the audience members come with a sense of bewilderment, whereas an actor would probably come with a sense of boredom into makeup and wardrobe. But once they go in, there's a noticeable difference in how people carry themselves, having these costumes on, and the conversations that people have. There isn't one really general, feeling that, or something that I notice about all of them, because obviously if people are confident or outgoing, they'll maybe be more like an actor and more likely to introduce themselves and totally, involve themselves in whatever's going on in the room and talk to the performers at each stage. But then there will be other people who will stay with their friend or whatever and just observe things. At the beginning, we stressed that we don't want them to pretend that they're in a Jane Austen novel or anything like this. So I think they're really directed in a way and told that they're wearing costumes that will feel foreign to them, but the conversations we want them to have and how we want them to act is as themselves. And then things happen, and I do feel that the way the performance or the event is structured, behind the scenes there's things going on, and there might be variables and variations to each evening. But actually, even I as a guide sort of get swept along with each event, and I think as an audience member, you do carry yourself differently, and it is interesting to be able to talk to people that you don't talk to, and it is a bit of a weird experience maybe, but at the same time, there is a structure to the evening that's happening. So I almost now think that they're not being asked to do that much. They just sort of get dressed up and come in and enjoy it. I know they did a lot of work together on how these conversations would arise, or how, what sort of order they should have, how long they should go on for, and the sort of topics and questions they might ask each other, but they're not completely set in stone. So they're sort of provocations, and they ask each other questions and ask each other to discuss things, and the audience are sort of encouraged by us as guides to sort of stop having conversations with us and listen to these conversations. They've had mixed reactions. Some people just want to keep talking over them and don't really realise it's part of the performance. Other people are really engaged and want to continue these conversations afterwards and say, that's interesting. What do you think of that, to the person standing next to them? In 19th century salons, you would have often had people coming to talk at these evenings, and they would have often been people who would be experts in their field or have something new to say, doing scientific experiments in front of people, and there to sort of, I guess, shock and provoke and things like this. So Stuart wanted there to be some guest speakers each evening, and so the only sort of instruction there was that they should talk in some way about the future, as seen from 2011, and it didn't really matter. We wanted there to be a variety of subjects, like science and the arts and technology and things like this. I sort of started with science because that seemed most obvious, to find someone who had something interesting to say about the future. That seemed like the obvious starting point. So we've had someone speaking about nuclear power who's in the School of Astronomy at the University of Glasgow. It's really varied from speaker to speaker, but the majority of them have come to have costume fittings. And our costume department is so wonderful and straightforward, so they sort of, I think, that first initial interaction, I think they feel quite reassured or get a sense of the space that they're going to speak in and things like that. But those who have just arrived have either been, just arrived and seen their costume and come in to speak, have either really enjoyed it or been a bit thrown by it. there's certainly people who don't want to like get dolled up, so to speak. There's been a few sort of, you know I'm confident in public speaking, but I'm not that confident being put in this crazy costume and then having loads of makeup put on me. But they've been minor sort of issues. I think I found it really interesting doing this in how you can take a long time over something. I think that is one thing that I definitely had never seen happen in quite the same way. I've never seen someone have an idea 2 years ago and then just very gently develop it over, 2 years. And every aspect's been given so much thought. And if one tiny thing's taken a week to, make perfect, then it's been allowed that week. And so I think, in order to create something this big or whatever, I think you need to give it the space to grow and build in its own way, slightly naturally, rather than we've got 2 months to build this and make it happen.